What childhood mystery was solved in the most unexpected way? I grew up in a small town in the late 90s, the kind of place where nothing major ever happened, so even the smallest oddity would stick in people's minds for years. This one has been burned into mine since I was about 7 years old. My parents bought an old house when I was 5, a big 2-story place built sometime in the 1940s. It had creaky floors, peeling wallpaper, and a backyard that seemed to stretch forever when you were a kid. To me, it was magical. To my parents, it was a fixer-upper they could afford. Now, the weird part started with a single door. In our upstairs hallway, right at the end, there was this narrow, pale blue door with a brass knob that never seemed to shine no matter how much my mom polished it. Behind it was a small, windowless room, maybe 6 feet by 6 feet, with bare wooden floors and shelves nailed into the wall. At first, my parents told me it was just for storage, holiday decorations, old suitcases, stuff like that, but I noticed something strange. Every time I peeked in there, the shelves were empty, completely empty. No boxes, no clutter, nothing. Being a curious kid, I'd sometimes open the door just to check, and almost every time I'd find nothing unusual, just still air and the faint smell of dust. But once in a while, the room would have this other smell, a strong scent of peppermint, like someone had just opened a bag of candy canes. I asked my mom about it once, and she just said, oh, maybe the previous owners left something in the walls, and then quickly changed the subject. One summer, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of creaking floorboards outside my bedroom. My room was right next to that little blue door. I remember lying there, frozen, listening. The sound was slow, like someone tiptoeing. Then the door clicked. It didn't open. I just heard the knob turn a little, then silence. The next morning, I told my dad, who laughed and said I was dreaming. But later that day, when I walked past the blue door, I noticed something new. A single peppermint candy sitting right in the middle of the floor inside that empty room. No wrapper, no dust, just a perfect little red and white swirl. I didn't eat it, obviously. Even my 7-year-old brain knew that was weird, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Over the next year, the same thing happened about 4 more times, always at night, always after I'd hear those slow footsteps. I'd wake up, hear the doorknob jiggle, and the next day, a peppermint candy would be there. My parents were adamant they didn't know where the candy came from. My mom even accused my dad of sneaking them in there to spook me, but he swore up and down he had nothing to do with it. I started to feel less scared and more curious. Who or what was leaving them, and why only sometimes? When I was 9, my parents decided to repaint the upstairs hallway. They took the door off its hinges to make painting easier. For a few weeks, the little blue door leaned against the wall, leaving the tiny room completely open. During that time, no candy appeared, no footsteps at night. It was just an empty storage nook again. When the door was rehung, I almost expected the peppermint to return, but it didn't. Months passed, then years, with nothing strange happening. Eventually, I chalked it up to some weird prank by a neighbor or my parents, and life moved on. Fast forward about 15 years. I'm in my mid-20s, back in town for the holidays, sitting in a local diner with my mom. We're talking about the old house and all its quirks, when out of nowhere, she says, do you remember the little blue door at the end of the hall? I laughed. How could I forget the peppermint candy room? She gives me this strange look, half smile, half sigh, and says, I guess it's been long enough to tell you now. Turns out the house used to belong to a man named Walter, a retired school teacher. He and his wife never had kids, but Walter apparently loved handing out peppermints to the neighborhood children. When his wife died in the early 80s, he started spending more and more time in that tiny upstairs room. According to the neighbor, he'd sit in there reading, with a bowl of peppermints on the shelf, in case a child ever came to visit. One winter, he slipped on the icy back steps and broke his hip. He never fully recovered, and within the year, he passed away. The house sat empty for a decade before my parents bought it. Here's the part that made me grip my coffee cup so hard my knuckles turned white. The neighbor told my mom that Walter was found in that little blue room, sitting in a chair, with a peppermint in his hand. I must have gone pale, because my mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She swears she never put the candy there, never heard the footsteps. She'd kept the story from me so I wouldn't be scared. But she did say one more thing before we left the diner. The day before we took that door off its hinges, I found a peppermint on the floor in there. I didn't tell you because, well, after that, it just stopped. I don't believe in ghosts, or at least I didn't. But I can't explain it. The timing, the candy, the footsteps. Sometimes I wonder if Walter just wanted someone to accept his gift, to acknowledge him in some small way. And maybe when the door came off and the room was no longer his, he decided it was time to rest. To this day, I keep a small bowl of peppermints in my own living room. And every now and then, late at night, I'll catch that same faint scent of peppermint and think of the little blue door.